She's got the card.
Yes, he is, yes. And Sheriff Mirkarimi is our last.
Sheriff Ross! Sheriff Ross!
Candidate. All right. We're applauding to do the last one after 5 hours.
Save the best for the last.
And our club endorsement will be next Monday, so this is the Political Action Committee. Good to see you. And some of them are on video, or you're on video for them. So 2 minutes to introduce and the Q&A.
Should I sit or stand?
It's your choice.
It's up to you.
We have a talented cameraman who'll find you wherever.
Okay. Hi. I'll stand if that's okay. So thank you for your indulgence. I know it's probably been a long day for you. I'm Ross Mirkarimi. I'm the supervisor of District 5. I'm in my 7th year as being the supervisor for District 5. And I am now running for sheriff citywide. Honored and humbled to have the endorsement of Sheriff Mike Hennessy, who's been our longest sitting elected official in the history of the city. Probably the most understated elected official that I know. I'm running on something that might be slightly unconventional, maybe not to you, but I think to many San Franciscans, who most of them don't even know what the sheriff's office does, or even maybe who the sheriff is, because a whole generation has grown up with the same sheriff. And so there hasn't been an election in 32 years, because Mike Hennessy has been consecutively elected for 8 terms. So it's my responsibility to educate most San Franciscans what the sheriff does, and I'm attaching part of that legacy of the great work he's done to something that I want to carry forward, and that is empowerment. And empowerment in the industry of criminal justice is not something that you hear very often, but I'm just now coming off a piece of legislation as a supervisor that I'm rather proud about, and I've just empowered over 1,000 cafes and restaurants to be able to hire, by creating a new permitting structure, performance artists and musicians who never were able to be put to work before, because the permitting structure in San Francisco has always been so bloody cost prohibitive. And we've been trying to figure out, well, what can we do for small business, the mom and pops throughout all our districts, throughout the city, and the same way that we might be able to put people to work? Well, by creating something institutionally that actually is affordable, that's accessible, and it empowers the kind of communities that I know that are very important to all of you. And to me, when I came into elected office, when I was elected in 2004, came in 2005, I wanted to carry on the tradition of having art shows, exhibits in my office as supervisor. My predecessor had started, and something that I wanted to do with the kind of faith and the kind of dedication in making sure diversity for the arts are certainly, I think, well presented and underscored by City Hall. And so for 55 months, I've had art shows, unflinchingly, never wavering from the schedule, 55. Now I've gone to quarterly, they were monthly. Curating, as you know, can be very tough. I've actually asked a few of you to help me curate, because it's tough on staff and volunteers and me. But of some of those shows were Prison for the Arts, prisoner arts, because I felt, as I have always felt from the 10 years that I worked in law enforcement before I was elected supervisor, that it's important that we empower a community that is often invisible and one that is highly discriminated against, but one where there is the talents, and those talents are not really allowed to shine. So I thought it was important that we provide sort of an intimate showcase in City Hall of what it means for our county jail inmates, as well as from state parolees as well, and those in the state system, to be able, in my office, to be able to exhibit those particular arts. And I did so because I felt, even years before that I decided I want to run for sheriff, that it's very important to connect the dots, that we want to have the kind of intervention inside the jails that helps as many inmates as we possibly can, so that we realize of what happens inside the jails is connected to what happens outside the jails with regard to improving public safety. If it means that we certainly want to build on the reentry and rehabilitative restorative justice programs that have been started by Hennessy, that's exactly what I'm going to do. There's 2 very dynamic art programs that exist in the county jail right now. And I think it's very important that we continue to build on that capacity and springboard it, so that when we're taking on new prisoners, which we'll be doing very shortly from the state's prisoner realignment, we do so in knowing that this is part of a reentry rehabilitative structure. Many people may laugh at it and think it's kind of a footnote or a luxury, and don't give me that crap because we want to lock up people who've done their crime. And I disagree with regard to the fact that you can be both smart on crime on one of the bookends and understand the power of redemption on the other of the bookends, marry them together and see what those strategies look like, such as utilizing the arts and being able to help people in rehabilitation. So as a candidate for sheriff, I think it's high time we have the conversation and allow other San Franciscans to realize that public safety, neighborhood safety, the neighborhoods that are chronically distressed, especially because those neighborhoods often are the host to the same black and brown people who are the majority of our jail population that return to, are also the same neighborhoods that are most economically distressed, and that we realize that we have a role to play in the arts community in helping those communities outside the jails as we do inside the jails, and that's how I will lead as sheriff. Thank you.
Does that mean there's no question?
And why do you want to be sheriff?
There we go.
Are you going to wear a uniform?
Yeah, and I'll look pretty sexy, I think.
Yeah,
No, I mean, I get that question almost as much as some of the others. I want to be sure. I want to be sheriff because I do believe that I can improve public safety. And when I ran for supervisor, I'm seen as on the left side of the aisle, progressive side, but I think that for far too long, progressives have capitulated the idea of public safety. And because of my law enforcement background, I tried to marry those ideas in my own district in the Western Addition, which when I inherited was the second highest homicide rate in the city, holding 20 years. We now have the highest drop in violent crime citywide, holding 3 years. And we were able to do this by integrating tactics of community policing, which I had to legislate despite Mayor Newsom's veto, and I delivered the first veto override of his career as mayor on foot patrols, which created a lot of brouhaha in 2005, 2006. And on the other end, I insisted on lasering in public services, job reentry, job placement, substance abuse training in public housing, because I also have the second largest population of public housing. Mind you, 75% of those coming out of the system come back to our neighborhoods, such as Western Addition, Bayview, Visitation, LA, Sunnydale, Mission, Tenderloin, Soma, etc. So it requires a hands-on strategy to realize the connection of what it means to be a supervisor and how to also be a caretaker with regard to public safety. What I've been able to prove in my district and other pockets of the city positions me extremely well to be able to do it citywide and to do so in a way that shouldn't make you be fearful of who's going to jail, but understand that we want a smart on crime approach based on the people we can rehabilitate, try to rehabilitate, and those that we cannot.
So what you just said about what you did in Western Addition, we haven't seen quite so much of that in Bayview and Viz. So once you're in office, you'll help us push that along?
And without something like pandering, I think you would have gotten it. And I think that you understood that because we've talked about that and people in your circle did too. And that wasn't part of the citywide observation of your race for District 10, but I get that very much because I remember you and I had discussions like this in the past before. But without the institutional support by police or by their boss, the chief executive, the mayor, then it becomes a grassroots demand in order to see those level of strategies delivered. So as sheriff, I have a pulpit. I would have a pulpit that I don't have now. It's a citywide pulpit. It's one that's built on my experience as a district supervisor, and one with the validation of the retiring sheriff who supports me to do exactly what you're talking about in neighborhoods that are resisting these strategies.
So, Ross, could you talk about your prior experience in law?
Sure.
Law enforcement?
When I ran for supervisor in 2004, I was a criminal investigator with the district attorney's office. My specialization was in environmental crime and economic crime and elder abuse. I also spent a year and a half at the Youth Guidance Center. Before that, I went to the San Francisco Police Academy where I graduated class president. A lot of people don't know this about my background. I was also picked up. I was borrowed or loaned out to the feds where I was trained back east in Glencoe, Georgia, known as the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. It's the Quantico for everybody else but FBI. I was trained in advanced forensics, and I also have an honorable discharge from the U.S. Navy. So there's a whole other life to me that people don't really know about. But it's a life that I believe that should also include and enlist the wisdom of progressives. And I think that we shouldn't avoid these institutions and do everything we can to influence them and use that experience in whatever capacity we can. And understanding what the discipline and the structure of our paramilitary environment is like, and knowing so as a legislator, and knowing someone as an advocate, I think is exactly why, I mean, to paraphrase Sheriff Hennessy, why he supports me is to put all these disciplines together in advancing the office. And I like to remind people, because I know I've got some good opponents, but for them, it's about who's out-copping whom. And that's not what this race should be about, because Sheriff Hennessy was never a cop. He never, ever was a peace officer. He was an ACLU attorney before, when he was elected. He never went to the police academy. He never carried a weapon. He never had a badge, and he never arrested anybody, unlike me and some of my opponents. What he did is apply his knowledge and his compassion and his understanding of the criminal justice system in advancing our county jail system in a way that this state and this country has never seen before. And that's why I'm inspired to run for sheriff, because as he's retiring, there is no turning back the clock as far as I'm concerned. We've got way too much on the line to risk that being done.